Hi, everybody, and welcome to a
Apoc-
death
Apocalyptic? I
inviting
was gonna.
apocalypse. We did apocalyptic last time, so this is a
Oh,
death
okay.
inviting, finalistic, fatalistic, fortunate episode of Two Gays One Episode. And this week, we'll be covering the final half of the End of Evangelion movie, Rebirth, starring not Rue McClanahan, starring what's her name? Who plays Shinji
Nagomi Ogata?
Japanese? Yeah, her. Not Rue McClanahan. Where did I get Rue McClanahan from? Anyway, yeah. So that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about the wacky second half of the movie that the first time everyone watches it, everyone has strong feelings about. I can't imagine a world. It would be very interesting to meet a person who watched the second half of End of Evangelion and was like, that was okay. Yeah, a little boring, a little bland. Yeah, whatever. Like, it would be. I don't know if I'd want to meet that person.
It's
That
polarizing,
person.
but in a way that I think really determines what kind of person you are in terms of your media enjoyment, essentially. So it's the second half of the movie is something that people either really love or really hate.
Or I don't think you have to really love, really hate it, but you'll have some reaction. You'll have some strong feelings about the
Yeah.
ideas in it. I don't unless you're like a big Hodorowski fan or something, and you watch like really weird movies. You're not gonna watch this and be like, "Well, that was boring." Like I can't imagine that. That's what
I
I'm
when I
getting at.
first saw this movie, I was sort of
You
speechless,
were
and
like
I didn't
four.
I didn't know how to feel, and then I went back and rewatched it a couple more times and then liked it. So that's sort
You
of.
were also like 14 or something when you
Yeah,
watched this
I
movie
was
for the first
actually I
time.
was
So
actually like a kid, yeah. So,
I was like 20. I was like 22, 21,
what was your
22, something like
reaction
that. So
after finishing it?
I think we talked about this in the last part, but I was very overwhelmed by it.
Yeah.
Very overwhelmed, and I didn't like it. I didn't like how it made me feel, just aesthetically. But then when I went back to it, I was like, oh, this is. I really like this. I really like the ugliness and the grotesqueness and the excessiveness of it. It's really appealing, actually.
So the credits are in the middle of the movie. Um,
Yeah.
they play Thanatos, and it's
Mm-hmm.
a really nice rendition of it. And I think it was a really interesting choice to have the credits in the middle of the movie as opposed to the end. Um, it's kind of unheard of in some ways because movies originally they had credits at the beginning of the film until around
Mm-hmm.
like the Star Wars era, and especially with George Lucas, he pushed it to be at the end because he wanted his title crawl and he didn't want that to interfere with
I think there
with
was also like
credits.
300 people who worked on Star Wars, like once you did all the visual effects and stuff. So
Yeah.
it was like, oh, you'll be sitting through a lot of credits if you watch. Like, can you imagine sitting through like an MCU movie and having to watch the
The
credits before
credits
the
first,
movie
yeah.
actually started? Be like 10 minutes of just credits.
Hideaki Anno does the bold and decides to put it in the middle of the movie, which I think is like a really really interesting
It's a
choice.
palate cleanser, honestly, is part of it. It's a big palate cleanser. You have the big action stuff in the first half, and then you have your little palate cleanser with the credits and the nice song. And then you have the rest of the movie, which is not very action heavy, but is very emotional and very stakes heavy. So,
If I recall correctly, I think that in the theatrical release, after the credits were over, there was also a little bit of intermission time, where they
mm-hmm.
had maybe like 5 minutes or something before the movie started back up again. I know that they did
uh,
that for Death and Rebirth. I'm not totally sure about End of Ava, but that would kind of make
mm-hmm.
sense to me because, if you're kind of watching something in the theaters and the credits come on, I think you might be a little confused. It's like, can I go and do I come back? Is it over? It's not actually over,
That's
right?
true,
So,
actually. That's fair, actually. Man, that movie ended. Wow, not very conclusive. I mean,
um,
Shinji screaming. I mean, is there going to be a sequel? And people are just like, there was another half of the movie, dude. And like, oh, I just walked out.
but yeah, it's a really cool choice, and it means that the movie ends very abruptly. So the
Hmm.
final image of the movie really lingers with you. I think, and it feels much more final when you don't
Yeah.
have the credits.
Have you watched this in a theater?
I have actually, yeah. So for when I was at anime club, we had a film projector, and we actually had
Okay.
a Blu-ray quality version of End of
Okay.
Eva to play for class, and so we watched End of Eva on the big screen in like a theater setting.
Interesting. I, that's cool.
Yeah.
I meant more. Have you watched it where, like, you would go see a current movie and
Oh,
like
like outside of
have that
academia?
had that
No,
experience?
they didn't.
You
They
know.
didn't. I don't think that G Kids has distributed it theatrically yet. I would be really interested for them to do that. So
Because I'm just imagining, like, you're so used to when you go to a movie, like, you have the credits come up, right?
yeah,
And then you kind of file out while the credits are still going. But like
yeah,
with this, it would just be like, how disgusting. Movie's over. Like, it's just like there's nothing else.
yeah. That would be such an interesting experience to actually witness how that was done at Japan at the time. I know that for me and my classmates, like my classmates were all kind of just they were left kind of shell shocked and just sort of shuffled out after that. But yeah, there wasn't any confusion though about the credits at the halfway point, because we were all kind of, let know that it was gonna have a credit sequence in the middle. So when the teacher put it on, it wasn't, nobody just left. Uh,
Wait, you first watched it anime? Is that the first time you watched the movie?
no. This was
Okay,
this
okay,
was
okay.
when I was like 20 years old, and I was
Right,
studying anime for a class at Berkeley. Um,
right.
yeah,
UC Berkeley,
yes, and
not Berkeley, Boston.
yeah. It was polarizing for people who were watching it. Not everyone was familiar with Ava, and those who watched it were just
I
kind
still
of
can't
watching
imagine
it
watching this
without
movie
the
without watching.
context. So,
It's so weird.
and
How would you?
and I was the weird student who was just like, really like sobbing or whatever. Everyone else was just sort of out of it and completely
You've
disturbed
never
and
watched
confused.
Ava, and you're watching this movie in anime club, and one of the students is just crying watching it, and you're like, "What the hell is going on?"
Yeah. Um, the only context that they had was that they watched 1.0, essentially. So
Oh, this you're thinking of a specific student, or it was played in the club beforehand.
no. We watched 1.0 in club, and then we went EOE after that. So it was back to back.
Okay, that's really weird, but all right.
Yeah,
I
1.0
think
to
1.0
EOE.
makes it more confusing, if anything. But
Um, because that was our kind of like Ava experience. Like the teacher wanted us to experience Evangelion and was just like, "Here you go. This is Ava. We're gonna watch 1.0 followed by End of Ava."
this is all you need to see. He was just like a.
I think
They
what
were
made
just
it
like a
even
hard.
worse actually was that he put on episode 25 and 26 in between EOE and
What?
1.0. So 1.0 was the context, and then we watched End of TV, and then he was like, okay, so this is several avant-garde art movements here demonstrated in these episodes, and then he put on EOE, and then he was just like, okay, so here's a couple more interesting things that Anno's authorship can be seen in this and whatever. So it was,
Okay, it
for
sounds very confusing.
for a lot of people, they had never even seen anything Ava related, and so it was just baffling to like
As
so
we
many.
mentioned in the last part, the movie does not explain anything. It assumes
No.
you've seen the TV show.
No, of course not. I mean, it doesn't explain. Even if you've seen the TV show, you're likely to be confused.
That's true.
So,
That's true. You're all on the same page because everyone's confused. No one knows what's going on. You know who the people are, though. At least you know who the characters are if you've seen the TV show. If you've just watched the movie, you're like, who?
I want to veer off topic really quick, or off course a
Or
little
back
bit.
on topic, or
No,
we're a
off.
little-
We're gonna go off a little bit. And I
we're
want
gonna
to
go on an
discuss like,
adventure.
how do you feel about likability, and do you think that it's like important? Because a lot of Ava is accused of having like a cast of very unlikable characters, and so I'm just interested in
think-
your position on that.
It's sort of strange to say that to me because I don't I don't know if I love Shinji, but I don't dislike Shinji. I don't really. Some people get very annoyed by him, and to be clear, I watched the show in Japanese first. I don't think I've ever seen the show in English. Actually, I don't think I've seen the original 26 episode television series in English. And I think Spike Spencer. All due respect to Spike, I actually think he's a solid actor. I think that has a lot to do with people's irritation with the character because he sounds like kind of more cartoony, I think, than Megumi Ogata does, and I think Megumi Ogata kind of grounds him a little bit more as like a real, even though he's still not whiny, but still I don't like the word whiny to describe him, but even though he's still hysterical a lot of the time, I think that's what it is. He gets very emotional. He's not quite the vocally. Her voice is a little more centered than Spike's is, and I think that has a lot to do with it.
I mean,
to go back to your question about likability,
in terms of character,
sorry, I went off topic.
Because like
in terms of character writing in general,
Asuka
yes,
and Ray's like really cold and distant, and you know all these like Misato is the only clearly somewhat likable character I think in the.
She's the only dynamic character I think.
Yeah.
I think she's the only personable one because everyone else is kind of awkward and. I think you need a charismatic character at the core of your story if you're gonna do this genre. I think that's really important, is to have a somewhat, having tried to write these myself a little bit, I think you need a dynamic lead character. I think you need not necessarily someone who is always charming, but who's always who has some personality, because I think the lead cast in Evangelion, while it works, the ensemble works, I think you do kind of want to have a character who is charming.
But
does that make sense?
Do you think likability necessarily makes for?
Is this a loaded question?
No. Do you think likability necessarily makes for like entertainment though? Because that's something I've been
Objection leading the witness.
Trying to grapple with, is that unlikable characters still seem to entertain people a lot, even if they're not very likable. And I think that's interesting, is that there are a lot of people who hate Shinji, but they finished the show. They didn't stop watching. That is
interesting.
So,
well, I think also with Evangelion, you're not just watching it for the character dynamic. You're watching it for the action sequences and the cool robots and the tech and the world and the scenarios and whatever else is going on. I think that's a big part of it. So there are other things to watch for. What I think is interesting is in like, because we had not so much anymore, but we had the era of the anti-hero, right? Don Draper, Walter White, and Tony Soprano. We had that era, right? All three of those characters are horrible people, horribly unlikable people. They're liars.
Selfish.
Pretty much all three of them are liars, live a double life. They're selfish. They put other people at risk for their own. I actually don't know that much about Tony Soprano, but anyway, yeah, arrogant, all that. But people love them, sympathize with them, and will go with whatever they're doing, and will justify what they're doing. But with Shinji, who I guess didn't exist at the same time, they'll be like, he's a brat. he's not because he's not a strong character. He's not an aggressive character the way maybe those are. So it's interesting to me that the more aggressive a character is, or the more decisive a character is, or the more authoritative a character is, the more sympathetic the audience will be to them because they do things with conviction. And you can see that even with just some villainous characters. They'll be like, oh, that character was totally heroic, except the thing framed him as a bad guy, but he was doing all the best stuff, even though they're like an awful monster. So that to me is kind of interesting.
It really is conviction. I think it's like a character that people really, really don't like, characters that aren't very goal oriented and driven and have like this determination, this burning determination to do something. I think that's really what creates I hate Walter White. Like, I see through that. Like, I see through those characters, and I think that they're horrifically unlikable.
Yeah.
And I don't want them to win. I'm constantly rooting against them when rewatching their shows. But like, people seem to be really enamored with that whole goal orientedness, and Shinji really defies that. It like kind of just spits in the face of all that. Where it's like, yeah, let's have a 14-year-old who has no idea what they're doing. If
Asuka was a 17-year-old boy. If Asuka was a 17-year-old boy who was cool, who wasn't like so abrasive, do you think people would like Asuka more?
Yes, I do. I think they
Yeah.
would like him. I think they would like her more
Or
if
even a
she was a
17-year-old
he
girl.
that.
I don't necessarily
Yeah.
think it's
Well,
sexism, but like if she was like a cool upperclassman, like chill, like over this, just really calm, I think even then people would like the character a lot more.
yeah. Um,
I don't know what my point
I
is,
just
but I
say
just
this
think that's
all,
true.
I guess, to. I say this all, I guess, to just like, um, as an interesting concept in writing, because I find, I had professors
Hmm.
tell me likability is not important. What's important is understandability, that you understand that their actions and that they're consistent with themselves. um and then in practice, through my own writing, I've discovered that
Yeah,
people
I think it's
really,
conviction.
they'll still read it, and everything like that, but they really, really resent characters that are very flaky, or like that they won't follow through with everything in that way. It is conviction. I think that's what really comes down to.
Hmm.
People just really, really love characters with who
This was
have
actually a
conviction.
discussion I saw on Reddit recently. It was about Metal Gear Solid, and it was like, why does everyone hate Huey so much? He's not the worst person to ever be in Metal Gear Solid. He's not nearly as bad as some of the villains, but people love the villains, but they hate Huey. And I think my answer was just like, he's just like a weasel. Like, he's just a little weasel. Even doesn't matter how good or bad he is. He's just like, he lacks any sort of charm or like conviction, really. Like, he's very weak morally. So even if he was a bad guy doing bad things, if he did it with conviction and he had a strong viewpoint, you would not hate him as much.
Mhm. And so, kind of going forward from this,
Yeah.
we have like, Ava and Shinji at the epicenter of the second half, because I think Shinji really takes the center of the second half of the film, as being a character that is very polarizing to a lot of people, that has
Everyone's
made
just in his orbit, I think, in
horrible.
the second half a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, like the first half of the movie is very much about like almost the other characters, and then the second half is like, okay, Shinji time. It's Shinji time. So
Well, I think in the first half you see everyone else's agency. Like, Masato has a lot of agency in the first half. Ritsuko has a lot of agency. Rei has a fair bit of agency. Even Rei has some agency. Asuka doesn't have any agency until she has a lot of agency. Shinji doesn't really have any, and so it's like we're seeing all the other characters work through their stuff. And then in this part, in the second half, it's like all about Shinji's agency, and everyone is just kind of stuck in his orbit, stuck floating around him while he works out his own issues, which
yeah,
is kind
he's
of
the
interesting.
epicenter of all the decisions at this point. Which, by
Hmm.
the way, is like a good thing for character writing as well. Is that the protagonist? I was told, and I think this is true, that the reason why your protagonist is the protagonist is because they make the most and the most important decisions. Uh,
Hmm.
and I think that there's truth to that. Like, where a character who isn't making choices doesn't feel like they have agency, or and Shinji's a character who doesn't want agency but does have a lot of agency.
No. Yeah, he doesn't
So
want to make decisions. This is the weird thing,
yeah,
is he's the protagonist, and
he's
his
like, I don't
decisions
want
are
to
the
be the
most
main
important
character.
ones.
So
But he doesn't want to make any decisions. He wants to be told what the thing to do is.
yeah, and so the
And
second half of the movie is
I think that's
focused on
reflected
that.
in Gendo too. Really, Gendo doesn't really. Gendo is constantly making awful decisions, but he doesn't really want to. He wants Yui to tell him what to do. He's
Yeah, they both want to be ordered
he's
around by the women in their lives.
they do.
Yeah,
They do. What's the term though? They're both masochists.
submissive. Yeah,
They're both submissive. Yeah.
subservient, submissive.
Subs.
Um,
I didn't want to say something stupid like they're both betas or some shit like that. So I said, oh, excuse me. So I said what I said.
Okay,
And
so
yeah,
and we haven't even
so-
started talking about the movie proper. So the
not
first thing that we
really.
see after the credits is this red cross kind of image, which and it's
Yeah.
Ano's message thanking the voice actors of Ava. I mean, at least a lot of people interpret it that way. He says something like the
Mhm.
5 women who made Ava possible, and it's
Some random
it's
women.
either 5 or 4. Was it 4 or 5? I can't remember.
I thought it
Um,
was 3.
no, it wasn't 3. It's definitely more than 3. But yeah, people think that it's like Misato's voice actress,
Asuka and
Rei's,
Reyes.
Asuka's,
And Shinji's,
Shinji's.
I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's 4.
And then we get the cut from the logo, which is this red cross, to this match cut to Lilith on the cross, and that's kind of how we transition.
Mm-hmm.
And Rei's body is falling apart, and it's being reduced to nothing.
Yeah.
And it kind of like gives you a glimpse into
the AT field, which is a symbol for someone's self identity, is deteriorating.
Melting.
I think that's what
and,
Gendo says.
and that's
Yeah,
and that's
melting.
giving a preview for the Kamsu's Todd sequence later in the movie. So we open kind of like very, very quickly with like people are falling apart, literally and figuratively.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yep.
and
So
then we get more Sele.
we get a lot of Sele. And again, I don't mind Sele in the movie. In the movie, they serve a purpose, at least. They're not just here to create intrigue. They're actually an antagonistic force, rather than just sitting around in boardrooms yelling at Gendo about nothing.
So now they're chanting like a cult. It's very much like Thule Society.
Yeah, they're cult-like in the movie, which is interesting.
And
they're not, yeah.
Yeah, they're very Thule Society, very Illuminati, and they're kind of they're chanting and they're going like, this is what's gonna happen and everything, and they're leading the events to go along as they are, and so they captured Shinji now, and they're gonna use him as the epicenter of their wish for humanity to join into one super being, except for Gendo.
Except for Gendo.
Except for Gendo.
We're leaving him behind.
He is not going to be part of our new world order.
He's disappointed them.
Also, we have that scene with Gendo touching Rei inappropriately, which I forgot to mention. And I don't want to talk about this too much, but it's sort of like, I think, comparing kind of Gendo to Shinji's like action over Asuka. It's this kind of like unforgivable
another defiling,
but whereas Shinji has like so much regret, I think it kind of juxtaposes how like Gendo is sort of reserved and kind of like accepting that this is like messed up or whatever. So
I was gonna say it's purposeful in his case because he's doing it for his evil plan or whatever. He's not copping a feel just to cop a feel, but it kind of like recaps you on his uncomfortable touching.
Yeah,
it is uncomfortable touching.
I don't think he sees her as Rei as her as a person, and this is another demonstration of that, where it's like, I am defiling you, but I'm not concerned, and this isn't sexual. It kind of just is. So
I don't know if his relationship with Rei is sexual or not, because the way he talks to her and treats her is as his child. He does talk to, or as his friend, even when they're chatting. He's like smiling and laughing and like talking to her like a person. So he treats her more like a person than he does Shinji. So yeah, but I think you're right in that it is another moment of uncomfortable sexualization meant to irk the viewer, and make them feel as uncomfortable as the characters do.
It also kind of justifies Rei's decision that she's about to make, which is to betray him.
Yeah.
You know? So it kind of it recontextualizes their relationship again, or contextualizes it in a way that sets up for that eventual betrayal.
Yeah, though I think she's already decided that, but yeah, it does contribute to that he's,
or at least that we'd understand, right, as an audience. And then we get the title. We get another title card, which is Sincerely Yours. And I think that's kind of an interesting title because it sounds like a phrase that you'd say at the end of a letter, right? You know, it's like Sincerely Yours, Hideaki Anno kind of thing. And I think that's but it also is like a double pun, right? Where it's like, I am yours romantically, I am sincerely yours like that sort of thing. It's that Ano loves his wordplay in English. In English, he loves his wordplay.
I don't know how good his English is either, so that's kind of impressive.
I mean, I'm not sure. I'm sure he's getting help. He had somebody translate the entirety of Kamsutra into English from his. He wrote the song, and then he had somebody adapt it into English. But yeah, sincerely.
Oh, we get to talk about the other song that they wrote for this movie that they didn't include. We get to talk about the other vocal song that I really love.
Oh, right, which is basically a beta track that they were considering using. Called Everything You've Ever Dreamed, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I love that track. I love that track so much. But we'll talk about that when we talk about Comes to Surrealist.
Yeah, it's kind of a missed opportunity that they didn't reuse it for Rebuild, but whatever. I think it would have been.
And if Kojima had written this movie, we would have had like 6 beta tracks to talk about. Because Kojima notoriously will get people to produce like 8 more things than he actually needs to finish his games. So, anyway.
But yeah, I do like the title of this. I think it's a nice wordplay, and he's kind of it almost feels like a present or something, or like a gift to people, which I think I think it foreshadows. It also,
because you write sincerely yours after your letter's over. That's when the letter's already over. So that's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
So Evangelion's already over, weirdly.
And then we have a bunch of stuff that happens. Lots of Sele. Spear of Longinus comes down from space.
If you missed it, here's Shinji screaming again.
Yeah. And so the Spear of Longinus comes down from the moon. So it was hurled there by Rey during episode 22 when she chucked it there to kill Ariel. And Unit 1 calls upon it, roars, and its spear comes to it because it will return to its master, which is not lore that has been set up at all, but it's here. And so the spear comes down, and it basically looks like it's about to strike the throat, which I also feel like is a sort of subtextual foreshadowing of when Shinji strangles like Asuka in the nightmare that he kind of has in Instrumentality, where it's this very like vulnerability of the throat type of thing, like you're at somebody's throat.
There's a lot of religious symbolism going on here to give you a sense, at least, that it's all bigger, everything's more important. It's to make you feel small, basically.
And then we have like a lot of references to the number 9, right? So there's the 9 Ava series, which could be.
It is a holy number.
Yeah, it's a holy number. It represents
9 Sele members. Wait, no, there's 12 Sele members, isn't there?
12 is also a holy number.
So, 12 is also a holy number. So is 13.
There's a lot of holy numbers in general, to be fair.
Isn't 7 a holy number too?
Yep, it is. And so is 3. And
any odd number is a holy number.
And then we get the imagery of the Ava series stabbing Shinji's or Unit 1's hands, and then we see Shinji looking down at his hands, and he has these burns, which are
they string him up
like the holy stigmata.
They string him up, which is a way to deify him and tear him down at the same time.
Yes, it's a terrible, awful moment, and there's kind of like an antichrist element to this in general. It's a very twisted and warped view of the kind of Jesus mythos, where like Jesus himself sacrificed himself willingly sacrificed himself to save all of humanity, and Shinji is being defiled and kind of like forced into being in this role unwillingly. He doesn't want to make those decisions, and then is going to destroy the world. So it's kind of an antichrist inversion of the Jesus mythos, which is interesting.
Yeah.
And I don't think, by the way, that Ano is like a mega Christian or is looking into he's kind of doing this in the same way that we might look towards Greek mythology and kind of like write that into our
we've
narratives.
discussed that before, but absolutely I think Evangelion's use of Christianity is a mythological based one, not
but that doesn't mean it's inaccurate or that it's not researched. So
well, I think most people think it's purposeless, like it's just it's just woo kooky thing. Like there's no.
I think it really adds to the atmosphere of this, though, because it would not
No,
be...
it does. It does, especially here.
Yeah, it would...
Like we were saying, it kind of makes you feel small. It makes the characters look small and
Yes.
feel small. I'm sorry for talking over you, but
It adds to that cosmicness that you're insignificant, which is also funny because Evangelion's kind of like... I had a professor once tell me this term, which is Mythopia. And a Mythopia is a taking the domestic, the ultra small, the personal, where it's like about this Japanese incel, and it's elevating it to a mythological godly status. It's that
who's the Japanese incel in this case?
Shinji. So
She's not an incel.
a 14-year-old boy. I'm joking. It's a
Okay.
joke. I don't think 14-year-olds are incels. That's a terrible thing to say about a child.
You have to really stretch to turn Shinji into an involuntary celibate person. Like, isn't inaccurate though, because he's always frustrated that he doesn't know what. No, he's not an incel. No, he's not. He's not. No, he wants clear answers, but they don't have to be
young,
positive ones.
all young people are involuntarily celibate. So, but anyway, the
Okay, go on.
So and that kind of contradiction of the Mythopia, it creates that dissonance where you have like this insignificance being brought to this huge grand scale, and that creates a weird atmosphere. And I really, really like that. There are some critics of Eva who have talked about, it's like, oh, Shinji has Superman responsibility without Superman personal stakes. And I actually think that really adds to the cosmic horror of it.
Explain what you just said, because I don't understand it, so I'm assuming some of our viewers don't either.
Right. So basically there's like some critics who say, oh, well, Superman has these like world-ending stakes and everything like that, but he's really concerned with the world as a whole and with humanity as a whole. So his stakes, his personal stakes, are very grand, for the most part. Lois Lane notwithstanding. But Shinji is like, he's more of just like, I'm alone, nobody's treating me nice and everything. His stakes are more about the interpersonal relationships that he has. It's all about Lois Lane. It's not about humanity. It's not really caring about like the bigger scope of things. But now he's been given the responsibility and kind of like the burden of these world-ending stakes on his shoulders as somebody who is not concerned himself prior,
which he wasn't even aware of.
Yeah,
he's never heard the name Sela. He's never heard that name. He barely knows what Nerve is.
He is a cog, like a small part of the machine that
he's
is
a
Nerve
very,
headquarters.
very tiny part of this whole operation.
Yes.
Which is also kind of what's going on in Gilgamesh, incidentally. But yeah.
Which I still need to see. But I like that though. I think that's really cool, and like I said, it adds to the cosmic horrorness of it, because I would say the second half of the movie is super cosmic horror. Like the idea that humanity is really small compared to the the craziness that is the universe and the galaxy and the vastness of everything like that, and kind of just a character who's subjected to things beyond their comprehension and everything, and yet humanity still kind of breaks free from that and kind of has a voice, and it's a very optimistic kind of cosmic horror take. It's a more of like a subversion of it, but I think that Mythopia, that dissonance between personal stakes and plot stakes is really interesting and does add. So and then we get a lot of explosion imagery in the second half of Eva, which obviously is kind of like an allusion to World War II and sort of these anxieties.
Obviously,
Japan.
Clearly, 100. It was apparent to me immediately. I was like, World War II, right there. I don't know if that was obvious.
It's kind of like the elephant in the room, though, when you have like lots of big explosions and everything. Like Second Impact itself is a giant explosion that wipes out a lot of people, and now you have Third Impact happening, and so you have just these like huge explosion
which is
imagery.
A spiritual impact more so than a Yeah. It's a
And
spiritual destruction of humanity rather than a physical destruction of humanity.
as far as like World War II anxiety, so you have like the bombs that dropped on
Well,
Hiroshima
okay.
and
Here's the thing.
Nagasaki.
Here's my theory.
Yeah.
All Japanese media is about World War II and the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Like 90% of it. 90% of it either refers to that, has some indirect reference to that, or has some discussion about
I
nuclear
don't even
warfare
think
or
you're
something.
wrong, like, at all.
No, I don't think I'm wrong at all. I'm not even kidding.
Yeah,
Actually,
you're not
no,
even.
I think
Yeah,
that's
it's
true.
like it's true of Akira, it's true of Godzilla, it's true of
Metal
like
Gear
all
Solid.
these lots of Japanese media just across the board discusses
Sailor
this, and it's
Moon.
hard
Okay,
to,
I don't know about Sailor
it's,
Moon actually, but
it's hard to it's hard to escape from, though, when World War II itself created the society that is current Japan. Like, a lot of the
Yeah.
embrace of collectivism and the de-emphasis of individuality that Ava struggles with is caused by the post-war culture. That kind of like, okay, well, we just went through this horrible tragedy. It's time to pick ourselves up by our bootstraps, suck it up, and fix and fix everything. And so I think it's important to kind of understand that that is a large basis for like Ava's inception at its core.
yeah, it's called the Masato philosophy.
And you have just the eye of the Illuminati imagery too. Like, the first explosion that happens looks exactly like an eye, which is funny because it ties in later when Unit 1 bursts free from Lilith's eye. It's like a very, very striking visual parallel.
Excuse me.
And so you have this you have the kind of the eye, which I think represents kind of like the collective and being viewed, and kind of like this pressure of the society, and kind of just being like watched by them and shaped in that way.
Yeah.
It's that godly presence that looms over everything, that controls everything, and then you have the individual that will break free from it later with Unit 1. And so it's kind of just like culture has a lot of pressure that's put on us, and that's kind of what it represents with the explosion plus the eye. And how the Illuminati Sele stuff with the eyes as well, and how they're controlling and puppeting everything, and so you just have that individual breaks free from all that later on, which is really cool.
I think that's all a very valid interpretation of the movie. So
yeah,
Instrumentality is about unity and unification and one voice, one goal for humanity, and then Shinji's conclusion, spoilers, is that everyone should have a choice. Everyone should choose whether or not they want to live in a painful world of isolation, or whether they want to be part of the collective.
Yeah, the collective is it's sort of funny because Anno is kind of criticizing, or like, not, well, yeah, he's criticizing how Japanese society sort of washes away individual problems and things like that. Like, it's about your mental health doesn't matter because you have to just suck it up and deal with it and everything. And he's kind of just like, well, no, we're people, and it's up to us to really, like, we need to help ourselves, that sort of thing. So and maybe we're going into the broader themes a little bit too much here, but I don't know. The JSSDF gets wiped out soon after, right?
Is it the devil himself?
Yeah.
And then they just get like blown up, which, as we pointed out in the last part, in part 1 of this movie, they were just dupes. They were just the Sele lied to the government, which lied to the army, and the army did this all for nothing, and then they all got wiped out by Unit 1. So congratulations, JSSDF, you played yourself.
More commentary from Anno and crew?
Perhaps. Perhaps, yes.
And one thing that's interesting as well is that there's a lot of fisheye lenses used in the movie in general, which is a very striking choice. Like, a lot of really, really wide kind of emulation
as a film student
lenses.
What do fisheye lenses represent?
So fisheye lenses can represent a couple different things depending on the movie.
What do you think
itself.
they represent in this movie?
Well, I think that they represent kind of how everything is, it's reality is being literally distorted, with a lens and such, and the extreme wideness of it is extremely surreal and kind of weird. And he would go on to use it a lot in Love and Pop, his follow-up film next year, which is a live action. And in both situations,
Who's Sasakawa?
Oh yes, it was written by Sasakawa. Love and Pop, great movie. You should watch it if you haven't. To anybody who's listening, but they're
I have seen that movie.
Yeah, did you like it?
I don't remember. It was so long ago.
We should rewatch it sometime. But
sure. Bonus episode. Or a main episode, perhaps. Let us know in the comments if you'd like to see our thoughts on Love and Pop.
Yeah.
And maybe watch along with us.
Yeah, that'd be cool. We could at least do a commentary track or something sometime.
Ooh, that'd be kind of fun. Yeah.
But so with fisheye lenses, you have reality kind of warping, and you're seeing a lot of the imagery, like a lot more in the frame. And it's a technique that's used when trying to distance things a lot. So like you'll use it if you want to be emotionally cold a lot of the time.
Interesting.
And
is it also a lens that's like a strong perspective, so you know it like makes you very aware that you are looking at something? Yeah.
Yes.
That's how I feel when I see a fisheye lens. It's like I feel very much like I'm in the shot. I'm the one looking. Strangely.
It's sometimes used in like horror for horror purposes as well. I think this movie uses it a lot, like for that reason. If you remember in Full Metal Alchemist, there's some fisheye lens stuff going on in the last episode.
Oh yeah,
last episode.
Yeah, there is.
And it's used kind of for the same reason.
Anytime the gate shows up.
Yeah, it's like horror and distance and being like cold and like all that sort of stuff, and surreal and warping, and I think it adds a lot again to the atmosphere and the overall style. And then we have Rei betraying Gendo, which means that her arc is now complete. She was a character who had like a huge lack of agency, generally wasn't able to make her own decisions, and was being controlled by Gendo. And now she's like, I'm gonna go give Shinji a wish because he wanted to. I am
not a puppet.
Yeah,
I think she literally says that right here. I'm not a puppet.
She's not a puppet. She's not an object.
I will not be a puppet. I think she even says.
Maybe that's another thing as well. Like when Gendo reaches inside her from earlier, like he's like sock puppet.
Oh,
puppet.
Yeah.
So there you go. There's a new reading. You've never heard that one before, but it's totally valid.
There's a non-sexual. That's not a sexual reading either. So there you go.
I think it's actually right too. Now that I think about it, I'm like, you know what?
That sounds more correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
If we can get as far away from pederasty and pedophilia while watching Evangelion, the better off we'll all be, I think.
Yeah. And Gendo actually feels betrayed here. Like he had no clue that Rei.
Yeah, the way it sticks out in my mind, because I've seen this movie in English at least, is the way
Tristan McAvery.
Tristan McAvery. Yeah, Tristan McAvery. I was thinking of Travis William for some reason. I mixed them up. I don't know why. I'm like, is it Travis McAvery or Tristan McAvery? Tristan McAvery. The way he yells, "Wait, Rei, stop!" It's like so out of character. Like it's completely different than his normal Gendo voice, and it just shows how the character's like his specterness, because he's kind of like a daunting specter most of the time, has completely broken down, and his facade is gone, and he's just a regular man again.
Yeah,
because nothing's going right now.
And so with Rei, she is now defying Gendo to do Shinji's wish, which is partly what Seele is okay with. I don't think that basically the Dead Sea Scrolls has this prophecy and whatever. I think we've talked about it before in the previous one, but it's gonna align. Everything's gonna align itself in a way that will give Shinji the wish, and Gendo's version of instrumentality definitely is implied to be different from whatever Shinji would have wished for. Like there's something different about it, because
I don't know how Seele thought they were going to take control of this.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're very happy. If during the Comes as a Todd part,
Lawrence
Keel is just like, yes, Ella's right with the world, and he blows up.
basically, if Gendo and Seele wanted the exact same thing, there would be no conflict between the two, and they would just be working together. But they are at each other's throats at the beginning of the movie. Gendo clearly wants to do instrumentality for selfish purposes and to bring Yui back or join with her. And I don't think he's really concerned with the rest of the world. So I feel like his version of instrumentality would have been different. Whereas like with Shinji here, he's mentally so broken that he wants to be in this state of mind that is, I want us all to be collective, so I'm not alone, but I don't want anybody to have an opinion about me or anything. So because I can't handle that right now. And so
I don't want people to be apart. I want everyone to be together.
Yeah, he wants for togetherness and blurring himself into nothing, like smudging himself into the folds of everything else.
He's scared of that too, though, because he has to be like coaxed into wishing, kind of.
Yeah,
as we'll get to in a second.
I mean, yeah, that's the thing. So Ray comes up. We have GNR, Giant Naked Ray. That's the fandom's title for it.
Is that an actual fandom? I've never heard that before. Yeah, the fandom
calls GNR calls her GNR. So
okay then.
So
all right.
So GNR comes up, which by the way is, I'm not sure if there was imagery like this prior to End of Evangelion, but post End of Evangelion, there's a lot of giant naked ladies in Japanese cinema. This is one of the most influential elements going forward.
Okay.
Paprika.
Sure.
Paprika has a giant naked lady in it, which is Satoshi Kon's final film.
Yep.
I think Diebuster has a giant naked lady in it as well.
Don't remember that from Paprika.
Darling
by the way,
in the Franxx.
Go on. Yep. Sure. It's
Darling in the Franxx has one. There's a lot of giant. It's a trope now, thanks to Ava.
I can't think of anything that has a giant naked lady in it myself, but I'm sure they exist.
It's a thing. It's a thing. And then you get like this awesome image of Rei holding Shinji in the
Legend
clouds.
of Korra had one. Go on, sorry. Not naked, but giant.
It had giant naked Korra. Not naked. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, she wasn't. I don't know. Anyway, whatever.
Tastefully nude Korra.
No, I don't think she was naked at all. I think she had her regular clothes on. They were just glowing blue. But anyway.
Giant blue clothes. Korra.
Yeah. I think it probably was. I think it's pretty Ava-ish. To be honest, that whole sequence.
So we have this awesome surreal artistic imagery of Rei holding Shinji, and it's one of the images that stands out to me most in EOE. It's one of those things that's just so beautiful and you can't really explain why. And then we hear the Ava series laughing in the background, which I thought was really weird and creepy when I noticed it, but when just before that 1970s Zen garden sort of shape, which I think it's supposed to represent a Zen garden, by the way. But
or
yeah, that's the
it was just a decoration.
field.
It was just a decoration that Ano saw in a disco club when he was dancing to disco and was like, "Man, I'm putting that in my movie."
He saw it on some album for like.
To be clear, what we're talking about is there's a very brief moment where there's like this weird, like, it looks like a fluorescent light shape, and it just appears for like a few seconds in a shot, and you're like, what is that?
So the thing with AT fields is that they're the opposite of what this shape is, where they're very like angular and square and like kind of like harsh lines, whereas this one's all curved lines or and everything octagons. Like that. Yeah, it's like octagonal kind of stuff or squares. And now it's like circular and kind of the anti-AT field has this design that is sort of antithetical to the normal AT field.
It might be just be an anti-AT field. That's hard to say.
It is an anti-AT field. It's the visual representation of one.
Okay, that makes more sense, yeah.
I think it also kind of reminds me of when you take a rake in a Zen garden, like the sand, and you're sort of raking it into various shapes and stuff.
Yeah, we talked about that, I think, yeah.
Yeah. It had super duper looks like that, which is interesting because that ties into the Nirvana idea and the Buddhist idea of like instrumentality.
Absolutely.
So, and then we get our cameo from Kaoru. Would you like to talk about this?
I don't know what to say about it. Like, Shinji's all freaked out because he's like, girl, ew, giant girl. And then suddenly it's, oh, giant boy, I'm into that. And he's like happy about it. And then some sexual penetration happens.
Yeah, the lance goes
metaphorically.
into his
The lance penetrates. Shinji invites the lance, I suppose, or
to
he puts
penetrate
himself
the
at
core
ease.
of AV Note 1. Yeah.
Yes.
Um,
So,
and I
yeah, Evangelion takes us into some strange places. Uh,
I actually used this as an argument once. So there was an anime forum called Kitsu. I think
no names, please.
I think it might be still
I'm just kidding.
around.
Go on.
No. No names. But there was somebody who I was arguing with about like the homoerotic elements of Eva and Shinji's sexuality, and
Mm-hmm.
and they were like, "Nah, Kaoru and Shinji were just friends." And I posted, "What about this? Like Shinji's basically being metaphorically penetrated by Kaoru here." And then he's like, "Oh, well, that is kind of gay." And I'm like, "Yep." So
Okay. Also, the look on Shinji's face after it happens is very
he's super orgasmic. Yeah, it's like
he's pretty happy. He's pleased. Again, the further we can get away from, well, it's actually not pedophilia. That's just underage. Anyway.
Well, it's hard to
Anyway.
avoid with EOE specifically because it is very like Freudian
It's very
and
about
psychosexual.
It's about it's largely because the whole show is about adolescent development. So now it's like adolescent sexual development, and I think some people get very uncomfortable about some of the themes and stuff in this.
It's perfect for when
but
you're
we're just
14.
talking
When
about
I
it.
watched it, when I was
Yeah.
14, I wasn't thinking about pedo stuff because I was all their age and whatever, and I was just
I
like,
know. When you're like
yeah.
30 and you're watching this movie, you're like, what am I
But
watching?
I think it's still worth examining and being open about
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
As
of
far as
course.
again, no condone, no, absolute. The sexual
Yeah, I don't think we've said anything that condones.
the sexualization of minors is horrific and disgusting, but in this case it's an animated film that is just exploring well
Oh God.
it's an animated film that's exploring adolescent sexuality in a way that
It's an
doesn't
important
do harm
theme
to
of
actual
it's artistic.
minors. So yeah,
It's artistic, yes.
it's
not...
it's a real thing. Like, you know, teenagers do go through this, so it's kind of, I think, considering its target demographic, because I don't think it was made with the intent of being for 30-year-olds. So
no,
it's
I don't know who it's for.
I think it's for 14, 15, 16-year-olds, and but also can be appreciated by adults because it's very well written.
I know you did, but I can't imagine watching this movie when I was 14. I could not even. I would turn it off. I'm pretty sure.
A lot of people I know who are Giga fans of Ava were that age, or going or struggling through something like a huge turmoil with like home life and everything. So that seems to be the people it's for, is like either adults who are experiencing hardship domestically with relationships or parents, and then kids who are going through that too. So yeah. And I think this movie's so disturbing and very very NC-17 on a lot of levels. But that's something that when you're that age, you're obsessing over all these dark things, and I think it's kind of something you can take or handle if you're in a depressive headspace, or if you're going through kind of similar problems the characters are going through. I think you can handle the stuff in the movie. It's not appropriate, but you know, like when you're young, you like edgy things and you like things that push envelopes, and so
I don't know. I was a very sheltered 14-year-old, so I probably would have just seen
I was too, and I still liked this. So you know,
Michael,
like
you watch very weird movies.
When I was 12, I remember my friends putting on Soul Calibur, and I was like, "Ew, the titties, they're bouncing, no!" And I couldn't stay in the same room. I had to leave.
Thank you for sharing that childhood anecdote with me and the rest of our viewers.
All right. So then
Anyway,
we have a lot of water imagery that kind of happens. So we have rippling of water. This is when Yui's talking to Shinji, and she's just like, "What do you wish for?" You know, Ray's gonna figure out what you want and give it to you, and there is a lot of water in this, which represents motherhood. You know, very traditionally Freudian and Jungian is like water equals mother. Because of kind of gross reasons, but, you know, breaking the water during birth and everything, and kind of like all that sort of stuff. But I'm just, look, these are old psychology people.
Freud.
Yeah,
you're just repeating Freud.
Yeah. but it also significantly
is a banana
ties into
ever
drowning.
just a banana?
It significantly ties into the drowning idea at the beginning of EOE when he's in front of the water.
That's true.
Again,
ties into a lot of. There's actually a lot of water themes throughout Evangelion.
Yeah, the ocean's like the first.
Sakiel
thing that we
is
see.
the angel of water.
Yeah.
Sakiel's the angel of the ocean, or whatever the hell.
And so you know, Japan is an island nation. Oceans are really important again, but it also kind of goes into that you're getting over your head, you're drowning, you're inside the LCL. There's like womb image in Ava itself. It has that Freudian subtext through the Ava units filling up with liquid that the characters then breathe through. It's very much like a baby floating in the womb, and so we're kind of descending into the womb in kind of a weird symbolic way now, and then we have the pyramid scene, which has been analyzed to death. Some
of it's kind of obvious and was ripped off in several modern films. So.
Yes. So Shinji's tripping out. This is the first real instrumentality kind of scene where we're tripping, yo. And Shinji is building this pyramid with two dolls, and the dolls very much represent Asuka and Rei. And then the dolls leave with a mother-like figure who is Misato. And what's interesting is, like, you have the dolls themselves that are very much it's interesting that they're both objects, that they're not actually children, because Asuka was so worried about, I am not a doll, you know, and everything, and Rei's also kind of concerned with that, and so you have them, but to Shinji's mind, they are people that he's playing with here on this playground. It's a and they are people.
Well, it also represents dolls. I think it represents how mysterious they are, because the doll's expression doesn't change. They're inaccessible. You can't talk to a doll.
That's so true, actually.
And later on that'll become apparent that or is it before? When does he talk about, like, why does everything have to be so ambiguous? That's from this movie, isn't it?
Yeah, it's from this movie. It's like the next scene. So
okay. So so he's struggling with getting an emotional response from. Can you imagine actually dealing with Asuka, by the way? Like, if you actually were a real person and you had to deal with someone who would constantly talk to you, like, never stop talking to you ever, and would criticize you, and then occasionally would show, like, an interest in you and talk to you and act like they like you, and then immediately afterwards go, I hate you, you suck, bye, and then just leave. That would be, like, the most infuriating person to ever actually deal with.
Probably.
Yeah. I never really thought about it from that perspective for some reason. I always had a very, like, clinical, like, top-down view of her, and like, I see all the different fascinating aspects of this character, but then now I'm like, wait a minute, if I actually had to deal with her, how would I feel about her?
I think I'd probably get along with her, to be honest. It depends. If I was another girl, I'd get along with her. I think she'd kick me in the face if I was a boy. So
if you were okay, yeah.
If I was a boy, I am a boy, yeah. Freudian slip there, or am I? The genderqueer misadventures of GoatJesus.
If I was a lizard man, I think she'd get along with me real well. If I was the
look, I'm not saying I'm a lizard man,
anthropomorphization of the moon, I think she'd hate me. If I was an anthropomorphization of a cumulus cloud, I think she would feel indifferent about me and go out for ice cream without inviting me. Anyway.
What's always struck me about this segment is that there's a very heavy film grain, like it was being shot on 8mm, which 8mm
Right.
is a type of film strip that was used more for domestic situations and for family home kind of movies, like home movies. So 8mm is much more grainy, and back in the day people used to like play projectors to remember like, you know, family videos that they're kind of taking. And so I think that there's a really organic and nostalgic quality about this, like we are remembering something that has passed already, which I think is very, very interesting. And there's a lot of symmetry here. And, you know, I was starting to think, why so much symmetry? There's the hills in the background that kind of represent breasts, and people interpret, you know, the sandbox that they're in as kind of like a womb again. But the symmetry of it reminds me of a Rorschach ink blot test, which is where you take ink on a piece of paper, and this was like a party game done. It's a Freudian party game done to sort of see what where your mind goes. So you take some ink on one half, you smash the half together, unfold it, and whatever you're seeing is what it means. And so I think there's a kind of like admittance that there's a subjective quality to interpreting this sort of scene. And
For sure.
and you know, Shinji talks about the cello as well here, which was the cello is like one of the big things from episode 15. It's a callback to episode 15, which this movie does a lot of calling back to episode 15, by the way.
Well, it's literally all payoffs.
Yeah.
It's payoff
but, you
the
know,
movie.
Shinji played the cello
Payoff of Evangelion.
and never stopped because he was never told to, which and he says this is just like the cello, which is, so he's admitting that he's like very subservient, very repetitive, very like it's a distillation of the character, and now we're in his head. And so we have a swing in the background, and you know, it's always really interesting because it's I think you brought this up, but time moves faster when you're having fun, and the swing kind of increases in speed.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it increases in speed, and it kind of has that pendulum sort of thing going on. You know, from the earlier in the first half of EOE, where the president's office, you have this pendulum that swings back and forth, and it's a clock. And the swing itself moves faster when Shinji's having fun, and then it becomes slower and grinds to a halt when he's alone. And it kind of like feels like when he is alone, reality ceases. It's a hell. It's a purgatory that you're trapped in. Time moves excruciatingly slow.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really interesting reading you had. You told me about that one.
I don't remember it, so good job.
You told me about it, but go you.
All right then, I believe you. Sounds like something I'd say.
Yeah, and Shinji's like a child here. He's obviously much younger. This is the age he would have been when Gendo left him. Is another thing, and so we're getting a lot of those emotions and those feelings from his childhood about how he was felt when he was abandoned, and how that kind of like sets up all these problems. He's also on a movie set here, which is not only a homage to episode 25 and 26, where Shinji is on a kind of film soundstage throughout that whole thing.
By way of like an indie beatnik, like poetry reading cafe.
Well, but I think that the point is that this is all constructed. So a film set,
it's all presentation. I just mean with like the spotlight, and the way the stuff is written. It's very like 50s beatnik cafe people.
I snapped to that.
The Curious Case of Masato.
Oh yeah, episode 25 and 26. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
My life is like a mime. I cannot speak. Words are not heard. But forever, loneliness, action moves.
Where did you steal this from?
Like water.
Where did you steal that from?
I was riffing off of the extremely goofy movie, I'm not going to lie.
I thought that was it. Why do I remember that? I didn't remember what it was. Maybe Norris in that movie.
Which, by the way, extremely goofy movie, probably the best straight to DVD Disney sequel.
Sure. It was a stiff competition.
the end of Evangelion
we've
of
decided
Goofy.
it's the end of Evangelion.
I'm not
of
even
Disney
kidding. Like, you remember that scene where
direct-to-DVD
like
movies.
Goofy trips and he's in a white void and stuff. I'm just saying. The end of Eva.
Everything is end of Eva. Everything's always end of Eva to you.
Maybe.
Sacred Star of Milos, just like End of Evangelion.
We've been running on for an hour now, so I think it's time to wrap things up.
Yeah, so we're gonna take a break.
Yep.
We'll be back next week. Hopefully we
Yep,
won't
with
have
the
another
with
interruption.
the second half, our epic conclusion to EOE.
And then we'll do more about EOE because we're gonna have a third part. We're gonna have part 5, part 6, and then we're gonna do End of TV.
Yeah. So
if you like hearing about End of Evangelion or Evangelion in general, stay tuned.
Yeah, and check out our Patreon for bonus episodes, where you can hear us.
So many bonus episodes that have nothing to do with Evangelion. So if you don't like listening to Evangelion,
yeah, check those out.
Check those out. I question why you listen to like an hour-long podcast about End of Evangelion if you don't like listening.
You know, we had someone in the comment section who is like, what are you going to say about EOE? Everything's already been said to death about EOE. I think we had a couple of things here that are fresh and original takes. So take that comment.
We very uncomfortably squirmed for like 10 minutes questioning whether we should be talking about teenage sexuality. So that's new. People don't usually take the time to do that.
People don't usually have the self-awareness to realize that they're discussing the sexuality of minors. In the Ava fandom.
I'm still very uncomfortable. I still feel like the police are going to show up at my door and be like, "What's this End of Evangelion podcast,
JSSDF,
sir? Would you come with us?" I just talked about the movie. Please. It's just a movie. I didn't make it.
Go arrest Ano.
Go arrest Ano. He's the one.
But yeah, thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you guys next time for our second half of the second half of End of Eva. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.